Welcome to the show. This is your boy, the digital pit boss, baby. And tonight, for a brief moment, we're gonna get into the first communist in Black America, Cyril Valentine Briggs, the American Blood Brotherhood. In this story, this real life story, it takes place in 1919. We kind of picked the story up there during what is called the Red Summer in America. So, y'all sit back and I'm gonna drop this down. Don't know how long ago, maybe 30 minutes tonight. We'll see how I feel as I kind of tear through this information. Not really gonna show any visuals tonight. Y'all let me know if y'all like the visual better or y'all don't mind the logo in the comment section. Definitely hand out the link, pass it around. Let's get these numbers up. I see y'all promoting a lot of bogus YouTube pages for the garbage they play. It's all good though. All right, so let's get into it. Let's find out who these people are. So we step off into 1919 with what is called as the Red Summer. And the Red Summer refers to an early autumn of 1919, which marks the death and higher casualties across the United States as a result of race riots. Various cities, Chicago, Arkansas, Washington, D.C., various places, they're rioting. The context of the riot is it's the end of the World War I. Blacks, white people, they all competing for jobs, coming home from the war. It was labor unrest in which the industrials used black people as strike breakers. And it increased the resentment among white folks. The riots were extensively documented in the press, which along with the federal government feared socialist and communist influences. Thus, our ABB, American Blood Brotherhood, which we're going to get to in a moment. And the influences on black civil rights movements following the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. See, the government was observing the Bolshevik Revolution going on in Russia. And they observed this socialist party there and the momentum that the party took in order to fight their revolution. And one of the things they feared is for that mindset to come across the seas and land into America. They really did not want that. You know, at this same time, you got a man by the name of J. Edgar Hoover who has created the Federal Bureau of Investigations. He's just getting started. And, you know, when you watch his movie, he got a famous case. I can't remember the white guy at this moment. But he tracks him down, a notorious bank robber. You know, that's what he got a famous case. I can't remember. White guy. All right. What up to y'all in the show? Welcome to the show. Got a little background going. Sorry, I had to kind of turn the volume off on one of the channels that I have open. So once again, we're dealing with, I'm just giving you the setting and the tone of the Red Summer in which this American Blood Brotherhood and the man that I spoke of earlier named Cyril Valentine Briggs, he would come to become the chairman and the organizer of the American Blood Brotherhood, which would be a group of West Indies journalists, Africans from West Indies, who came over into Harlem, where they fell into a level of oppression that was being propagated on the African Americans living in the area. But, you know, before I dig too deep, I just wanted to kind of give you somewhat of an insight of what was going on at the time in the area, across the country, actually, resulting in certain groups formulating. So you also have Black nationalist groups. As you know, the famous Marcus Garvey was around at this very time, formulating his UNIA program. It was catching lots of steam and pretty much building up a large empire. He was not the only one, though. I might introduce to y'all a few more names of Black nationalists, various groups that were all around, but I'm trying to keep the content of this information pretty brief. You know, these videos I do here, this is just for brief studies to throw some names at you guys so that you can go further, Google this, you know, track it down, read deeper. You know, if anybody want to contact me, my email is in the description box. Y'all can definitely hit me up. Let me know if it's some information you want, how I can help you. We can make that happen. So back to this Red Summer, right? So it says by 1919, an estimated 500,000 African Americans had migrated from the southern states in the industrial cities of the North and Midwest in the first wave of the Great Migration, which continued all the way until about 1940. African Americans had filled new positions in expanding industries, such as the railroads, as well as many jobs as held by whites. In some cities, they were hired as strike breakers. They started to pit the black folks against the white folks whose unions were forming strikes to control the means of production. And then the white folks used the migrating blacks from the South up to the North to break these strikes, and by that, it started to create these race riots, because violence is connected to money. Money is connected to violence. And so the following war rapidly demobilization of the military without a plan for absorbing the veterans into the job market and the removal of price controls led to the unemployment and inflation that increased competition for the jobs. So here you have the World War I ending, got black and white troops coming home to no job. Now what? Only jobs available is the ones to cross the line of the strike. Get you a job at the railroad. So they did. All right, so after you got the famous riot in Tulsa, Oklahoma, you got riots happening in Chicago, you got riots happening in Washington, D.C., and various other cities dotted throughout the country. There were many, 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 many riots in this particular era. Thus it gained the name the Red Summer. You can Google that, read along if you like, get deeper into the understanding what was going on there. So in the process of this Red Summer, a man by the name of Cecil Briggs, he was a pioneer in civil rights. He was a journalist. Pretty much, the American Blood Brotherhood was a group of journalists, but they were mainly coming from the West Indies, a socialist mentality. But that was a little bit mixed in with a black nationalist mentality because of their love for Garvey. So they become what is called a crypto-nationalist, meaning that publicly they were socialists, but quiet as kept, they had a black nationalist ideology that they did not make public. They formulated under a communist party of socialist journalists, but they was on the attack for revolution. They wanted change. It was a volatile situation that they were brought into. And they're following the ideas of this man, Cyril Briggs. So he was, let's see, he was born in 1888, on the Eastern Cameron Islands of Nevis. Briggs' immigration into New York in 1905 and enjoyed a burgeoning community of racial West Indian intellectuals in Harlem. And in 1912, he was hired at the New York Amsterdam News, where he voiced support for the World War I and Woodrow Wilson's anti-colonial doctrine of self-determination, which he saw as validation of his own racial vision of African-American self-rule, further radicalizing the wake of World War I and the Russian Revolution. Briggs stated publishing his own periodical, The Crusader, and in September of 1918, and 1 month later, founded by the African Blood Brotherhood, the ABB, incorporating Marxist class consciousness under the banner of Africa for Africans. Y'all remember that slogan, right? Africa for Africans. See, when you hear all of these red, black, and greens, they usually only think of Marcus Garvey. They don't have much information. They're not truly understanding the context of what's going on. Not a particular phrase can always be attributed to one person, as sometimes a thought process is just seems so right that multiple people accept this particular perspective. So the Crusader, which was the newspaper in which he had created there, that he worked for, and the ABB became vehicles for Briggs' distinctive merger of interracial revolutionary socialism with a black nationalism and anti-colonialism. So here you got a gumbo pot mixture of ideas. It's kind of like adding oil and water together. They say oil and water don't mix, but they sure taste good. Mixed with your flavors on your salad. All right. So understanding that he used an interracial revolutionary socialist paradigm in order to institute these ideas. So being that the body of West Indies were kind of fond of Marcus Garvey, they set up an office inside of Marcus Garvey's UNIA headquarters. You know, Marcus Garvey would use the group to go out as somewhat of a defense against the attack that was always commenced by W.D. Du Bois, the so-called Pan-African, the Kemetic Pan-African perspective. Some of them, not all of them. So in 1921, Briggs formally joined a nascent American Communist Party. As the ABB increasingly emerged ideology and organizationally with the CP, Briggs, along with his fellow Harlem radicals Otto Hiswood and Claude McKay, they became critical bridge between Black communism and the communist movement, the association that would grow in both numbers and significance over the next 2 decades. Briggs' conversion into revolutionary socialism. This is pretty much what happened in the 60s with the Black Panthers. They would have a revolutionary socialist perspective. This is somewhat of a journalist version of the Black Panthers in the 1920s. Not many of people I know have ever heard of the Blood Brotherhood. A lot of the modern day revolutionaries, they focus a lot on the 60s, 1960s, thinking that the perspective coming out of there is the momentum and the drive of what's been driving black folks for the 150 years that we've been free from the so-called slavery we're in to the so-called freedom we're in. See, what I'm aiming to show you today is that black folks prior to Cyril Briggs never had a true communist perspective. World War I in Russia brought about a communist socialist revolution over there, and ideals sprang forth from that. All the Black Panthers of the 1960s, it wasn't inspired by black nationalism. Oh, no, no, no. It was inspired by Karl Marx. Dialectic materialism, socialism, communism. That's just one of the many that they were inspired by. Now, there is very crisscrosses that these ideologies cross. I mean, lots of times they have ideas of wanting black folks to have things and control and self-determination. But then on the flip side, they're anti-capitalist. And in America, one can't be in control of his own environment if he's not a true capitalist. You can't be the king of your own castle if you don't own your castle. It's pretty tough. So Briggs' conversion into this revolutionary socialism drew him into a public feud with Marcus Garvey, the black nationalist, and the Universal Negro Improvement Association in the early 20s. Briggs castigated Garvey's brand of black nationalism for its capitalist overtones and ultimately cooperated with federal authorities investigating Garvey for mail fraud. Garvey would go to jail for mail fraud. Briggs' influence on the party circles declined rapidly in the mid-decades as the CP shifted, the CP being the Communist Party, its focus away from the communist-based revolutionary nationalism of the ABB. You get that? The revolutionary nationalism of the ABB. This is the crypto-nationalist perspective of the majority of the West Indies Africans that came over here to Harlem. The labor movement of the newly formed American Negro Labor Congress. This is where they moved to fight against labor laws. Jobs for black folks. Now, that's a little bit about Cyril Briggs. Now we're going to get a little deeper into this American Blood Brotherhood, right? In the summer of 1919 in America was the time of the racial rioting and violence, the remembrance of respectively by the historian as the Red Summer. Returning soldiers from the European battlefields, including blacks and whites, heightened expectations for freedom and the equality of whites seeking and returning to the civilian employment and the status quo antebellum, and the new immigrant black worker from the rural South formed a volatile mixture which erupted in the mob violence in Chicago, Omaha, and the cities throughout the Midwest and the South. In response to these attacks, the Crusader advocated armed self-defense politically. Briggs drew comparisons between government attacks on whites and blacks, radicals, capitalism as the underlying cause of oppression of poor people of all races, while endorsing a Marxist analysis. The Crusader advocated a separate organization of African Americans to defend against racist attacks in the United States, and likened this to the African combating colonialism abroad. In September 1919, the Crusader announced the formation of a new organization called the African Blood Brotherhood to serve as a self-defense organization for blacks threatened by race riots and lynchings. Not long afterwards, Briggs begins to forge connections with the pioneer black American communists, such as Suriname, that's spelled S-U-R-I-N-A-M, born Otto Haswell, a Jamaican poet, and co-writer Claude McKay. This would be the trio. They would gather up the West Indies to get this group going. Now, outwardly, the leader, he's formulating a Marxist paradigm. He's moving over to integrate with the American Communist Party. This is causing the appearance of the group to be a socialist revolutionary. Inside some of their hearts, they're searching for self-independence and black nationalism. But their aim of fighting is a socialist paradigm, similar to the Black Panthers of the 1960s. Now, they would have conflict with Marcus Garvey over time, and the ABB attempted to organize from the inside of the UNIA and advocate the policies for critical support for its leader, Marcus Garvey. The ABB leaders Briggs and Claude McKay participated in the UNIA in 1920 and 1921 International Conference in New York. At the second conference, McKay arranged for Rose Pastor Stokes, a white leader of the Communist Party, to address the assembly. The ABB became highly critical of Garvey following the apparent failure of the Black Star Line. And we understand that the Black Star Line was infiltrated and fouled up by agents working to destroy the black nationalist paradigm that Marcus Garvey was pushing. He's constantly being oppressed by people in his own culture. The opposite. The NAACP fighting to stop the separatist propaganda coming from Marcus Garvey, as they were fighting for a civil rights integrationist program. And this is where Pan-Africanism is taking a divide. To be truly Pan-African, you have to ultimately control your economics. And in doing that, you must formulate a nation. You definitely can't formulate a nation under a policy of integration. But currently today, the leaders we have, not many of any influence, are promoting the idea of nationalism. This guy by the name of John Hope, I see on Facebook, he got the civil rights movement going on, where he believes the battlefield is in the business offices, where we could just simply go in and make money by the millions. So we got a bunch of rich black folks with integrationist ideas running around with hundreds of millions of dollars, never ever thinking to themselves that they'd like to form their own nation and be in control of their own destiny. Because the modern idea of success is to have millions of dollars and sit comfortably in the integration. And you know, if you got a lot of money, you can fight off the hatred that those without money seem to fall victim to every day. But let's get back to the program. So in July 1921, an Atlanta meeting with the Grand Clergy Clerk of the Ku Klux Klan, Marcus Garvey and the Ku Klux Klan get together to have a meeting because there's too much killing in the Red Summer on the white end, They're fighting under the banner of the Ku Klux Klan, and on the black end, they fighting on every front they got. Their Socialist Revolutionary Party is fighting. The Black Nationalists, Pan-Africans is fighting. Everybody's dying. Black folks getting hit the hardest. But they fighting. It's what it is. When it comes to war, your ideology just really don't matter during the war. You just got to fight, because the war becomes a matter of socialist position, or should I say, whites against blacks, in the sense of position in America. You got to remember, they fighting over jobs. White folks with the lack of jobs. Black folks crossing over the barriers that white folks have imposed in their strikes. It's not necessarily fighting over the fact you black. It's fighting over the fact of who got the money and who don't got the money. When that money come up missing, everybody turns to violence. So the Crusader announced that it had become the official organ of the African Blood Brotherhood, arguing that the UNIA was doomed unless it developed new leadership. The magazine sought to convert the UNIA's members to the ABB. In seeking to replace the UNIA, the ABB competed with Randolph's Socialist Party, the Messenger. Oh, man, do you know what that means? This is a connection. This is a connection to show you who's the Pan-Africanist and who's the integrationist. We're going to get into the Messenger. We're not going to dig too deeply into the Messenger tonight. As tonight we're dealing with communists, black communists. The first black communist in the game is already trying to shut down Marcus Garvey in 1920, 1919. We're getting it in. It's a war over ideology and who's going to lead the people's minds. The Messenger, which had called for Garvey's expulsion from the United States. In return, Garvey called for his followers to disrupt meetings over these oppositional groups. In addition to the dispute with Garvey, Briggs and the ABB were targeted for investigation by police and federal law enforcement agencies. Historian Theodore Cornwebel reports that the government began manipulating racial organizations in conjunction with legal prosecution under the pretense of disturbing the opposition to World War I. Following the end of the war, a government campaign against communists, anarchists, and other radicals was instituted at the direction of the Attorney General A. Michael Palmer, himself the victim of two anarchist bomb attacks in what he is to be called the first Red Scare. Government agents were secretly planted in the UNIA, the ABB, and the Messenger. These agents provided intelligence to the Bureau of Investigation, while in some cases sabotaging meetings and acting as agent provocateurs. So, what do white folks do? Under the leadership of J. Edgar Hoover, the Bureau of Investigations, they put agents in all groups. The UNIA, Pan-African Movement, the ABB, Socialist Revolutionary Communist Party, and the Messenger headed by Randolph. That's the NAACP. Everybody is infiltrated. The ABB's lifespan is short-lived because they have such a radical, violent perspective coming from the socialist, communist perspective. They're out there planting bombs, dropping bombs. It's violence. Freedom is won by blood. Freedom is lost by blood. It's not easy to change paradigms in this world. So here you have J. Edgar Hoover. He infiltrated all groups. He needs intel. When he gets that intel, it won't be long. Marcus Garvey will be brought up on charges, sent to jail for 5 years, and he's out the way. The ABB will be destroyed and pretty much decimated from history. Modern day men will know nothing about him. The pit boss come along, drop these jewels on you. If you'd have been in my group, the Pan-African, the Fraternal Order of Pan-Africanism, which I started a little over a year ago, I cover all of this. I really wasn't going on video to do it at the time, but I post a lot of this information. And you can find the group on Facebook. And, you know, some of these subject matters, I felt they was important enough that I bring them back up, talk about them a little bit, since a lot of people, you know, they like to just listen to YouTube to kind of get their starter point, what they may be interested in finding out about. So I said, well, okay, I'll take a moment, I'll talk about these things. You know, I'm just kind of briefly going over this, people. I'm not drilling it as deep as I can. And I just like to introduce these topics so that those who are interested in this type of information can, you know, take the names, write them down, Google this stuff, buy the books, and get your knowledge up if this is important to you in any type of way. So, in dealing with the American Brotherhood, this group of West Indian socialists, they were trained this way coming out of the West Indies. They didn't have the same paradigm of oppression going on in the West Indies as they would have and understand when they got to Harlem. I'd like to take y'all back a little bit to 1895, when my main man, Booker T. Washington, because see, a lot of times with these so-called Pan-Africans, they're not going to mention Booker T. They'll talk for 2-3 hours. You'll never hear them talk about Booker T. They'll talk about they're in the financing and like a little earlier, I was listening to Boyce Watkins speak for 2 hours, talking about financing in a STEM program. And as he mentioned various people, you wonder, well, why you wouldn't mention Tuskegee Institute? 1881. Booker T. Washington builds this college and lays down the STEM program as the prominent education of nation building. And today, the main thing we talk about is you better get your finances together. And then with your finance, you better buy you some real estate, invest in you in some stock. You better learn a trade. You better know how to build a house or have some kind of understanding. And basically, you better get some STEM program in your life if you ever plan to achieve. So in 1895, Booker T is called up to Atlanta, Georgia for an event that they're having, like a conference. They call it the Cotton Conference of Atlanta, Georgia. This thing lasts a few months, and you know, they bring Booker T. So Booker T delivers his famous speech, and in this speech, he tells black folks to sit your buckets down where you are, meaning stay here in the South and develop yourselves with a technological, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, this isn't word for word, but you know, since I'm so familiar with the speech and various things, which you can go listen to that speech on YouTube. And the message he was sending overall is that black folks should stay in the South and build an industrial nation of people, because the resources was in the South. He was compromising on the fact that white folks didn't want blacks to go into politics and at the stage that black folks was at. He just agreed that for now, we'll agree. if it means that we can educate ourselves into some technical skills so that we can have a self-determination of our own to build a nation. There's stages to the game. But Booker T, he dies 1915. This is 20 years after that speech. And black folks are migrating up to Harlem, New York, and Chicago, and various places, and what is called the mass migration. Masses of people. You know, masses of people are not going to get up and leave if white folks ain't got something waiting for you where you're headed. You ain't just going to go and build something in the middle of nowhere. This is what the white folks coming back from the war is upset about. That all of these black folks is coming up here taking their jobs. Booker T warned you. But y'all love W.D. Du Bois. W.D. Du Bois was telling you, come on up here to Harlem. Let's get it on. So here we are. We're there now. It's 1920, and there's this red summer is cracking everywhere. Bloodshed everywhere. American Blood Brotherhood putting car bombs and everything else that they can find on people. The black nationalists, they shooting and killing white folks. White folks shooting and killing black folks. It's war. It's kind of a small war in a sense. It's not nations versus nations, but it's economics versus economics nonetheless. So, see what else I can hit you with here before we get out of here. I got one more name for you. I'm going to tap on this real subtle. And if you guys, want to hear a part 2 to this, just leave me a comment in the section. I'll dig into this much deeper. This was just a little small part. But before I leave, I want to mention another Pan-African group called the Hamitic League of the World. The Hamitic League of the World is open to every man and woman upon equal terms, and every member has the same rights as any other. The definite work of the League is as follows: to quicken the self-consciousness of our race and arouse it in a powerful race pride, to spread the knowledge of the part played by the Hamites in the development of human civilization, to work for the revision of all textbooks that falsely delete the truth concerning the Hamitic race, to strive for the universal admission of the equalities of races, to oppose all forms of prejudice against the race as well as all forms of prejudice within the race, to rebuke all magazines and newspapers which endeavors to harm the race by inflammatory news, untruthful articles, and disparaging dialect, to fight for the capitalization of all terms used in the ethnic designation of our race, to seek for all race exercise of civil and political rights, to promote the brotherhood of man. Those are the PowerPoints of the Hamitic League of the World. This was a Pan-African group that you won't hear on Sinetta TV. You won't hear from the Masi Warrior Clan. You won't hear about this from Brother Ump. And none of these cool little YouTube pages that I view every day and shake my head at, that they sow hatred of Black history in America, that they won't read you anything influenced by the Bible at all. They just hate that book and anything it was involved in. They'll only talk about it when they can throw darts at it. And because of that, you overlook a whole lot of history. But I can promise you this, those that hear this particular message I'm sending, you'll hear them talk about these subjects very shortly. They have a canning ability to come onto your channel and scoop up some of your information and go do a dialogue on it like they've been on it. But I've been doing it. They ain't been on it. So I just brought that to you today, folks. This is it. The first communist, black communist in America, Sorrel Valentine Briggs and the American Blood Brotherhood, 1919. That's how it went down. This is your boy, Digital Pit Boss. Appreciate you for listening to the show. Have a great night. For all my late nighters, I'm out.